The man came to the hotel every day to book the most expensive room, but he never stayed there. He just wanted to enjoy the complimentary buffet in the room. However, on this day, David suddenly remembered something while eating. He quickly wiped off the fingerprints left on the cutlery. Then he took out paper and pen, and quickly wrote down a message. Afterwards, he opened the room window, and carefully climbed outside. At this moment, David was on the 58th floor of the hotel. One wrong move could lead to an accident. David was about to do something that would shock the world. His behavior soon attracted a large crowd of onlookers. The police arrived at the scene immediately after receiving the call. Then negotiation expert Paul came to David's room. He tried to communicate with David, but David said he would only talk to Chief Susan. If he didn't see Susan in 10 minutes, he would take further action. Paul had to ask officers to find Susan. Soon Susan received the order and rushed to the scene. Susan was very confused. She didn't know David at all. But why did David want to talk to her? David said he wanted to use her fame to attract more attention. As it turned out, Susan had recently solved a case that shocked the nation. This made Susan famous. Sure enough, when the media learned that Susan was in charge of this incident, they immediately rushed to the scene to report. Now David's situation gained nationwide attention. Susan asked someone to investigate David's identity, but Paul handed Susan a note. It read, "No fingerprints were left in the room," which meant they couldn't identify David for now. Susan immediately realized David came prepared. Susan tried to persuade David. If he had any problems, he could tell her. Maybe she could help him. However, at this moment, David suddenly heard a voice in his ear. It turned out he had two accomplices. Henry and Lucy entered the building opposite the hotel. Meanwhile, David moved to the other side of the windowsill, then started directing their actions. By now Henry and Lucy had reached the building's roof. They took out explosive tools, preparing to blast open the roof to infiltrate the building. After everything was ready, David immediately made a fake jumping motion. This action instantly caused gasps from the crowd below. Henry and Lucy took this chance to detonate the explosives. The gasps successfully covered the sound of the explosion. The fake jump also made David appear nervous. Susan immediately offered David a cigarette to calm him down, and said she would smoke with him. However, when David returned the half-smoked cigarette to Susan, Susan immediately handed the cigarette to her colleague, and asked them to quickly extract fingerprints from it, to identify David's true identity. Meanwhile, Henry and Lucy successfully entered the building's ventilation ducts. After crawling out of the ducts, Henry opened the control box to make the elevator rise to the top floor, then successfully reached the target floor through the elevator shaft. To avoid being caught on camera, Henry first took out a skateboard. Then Lucy took out a cloth the same color as the floor to cover Henry. However, the security guards in the monitoring room were watching the news, completely unaware of the abnormal surveillance footage. This way Henry slid all the way under the cameras. He took a photo of the corridor from the camera's angle. After printing it, Henry placed the photo in front of the camera. But just when they thought they could execute the plan smoothly, a new problem arose. There was also a sensor installed above the corridor.